In the 2025 US Open, Carlos Alcaraz hit this crazy slice overhead, which took the tennis world by storm.
What a gap. Oh, he's not going to get that.
And so I want to help you do this. First, we'll talk about the strike you've got to create on the ball to create that side spin, which makes it cut away like that. And then we'll talk about exactly how you've got to throw and snap your racket up there to make it cut across the ball rather than slapping it down in a flatter action. So here's a side-by-side. We are going to look at the slice strike first. On the slice, as the ball is struck, the racket moves from left to right in addition to back to front. So this strike where the racket has a left to right vector, it creates friction on the back of the ball that causes it to spin. And then the spinning, due to something called the Magnus force, which describes how spin interacts with air resistance, causes the ball to tail off to the left like that. If we come over to the flatter shot, very similar, but then we don't see that. So here, the racket flies over and slaps the ball straight. No friction is created on the back of the ball, which is why it flies true instead of spinning off to the left like that. So that is the what. Now let's get into the how, and we're going to use Andy Roddick for this one. Same idea, we've got the slice serve on the left and we've got the flat serve on the right. So I'm going to start with the answer and then I'll explain. And the answer is, during this early part of the serve, throw your racket back behind your head more and it'll then cut across the ball when you get here. And here's why. We need to work backwards from what we want our arm to do and then load stretches into the arm to make that happen. Remember, we can't like flex our forearm at the last second on purpose to create slice. That doesn't work. It's not dynamic. We need to use the stretch reflexes and the stretch reaction in our muscles, tendons, fascia in order to play explosive tennis. So watch the slice. See how that's out to in rotation and the arm ends farther away from the trunk than on the flat serve. So now let's work backwards. Okay, well, that means I need my arm to go like this. So how do I stretch it so that when the stretch releases, I get the action on the left, cutting across and also driving, versus the action on the right, just driving? And the answer is, well, I just need a slightly more left to right loop and a slightly less back to front loop. So during this initial phase, look at the level of gap between Roddick's racket and his head. If I go a couple frames forward, see how on the slice, that racket is already close to his chin, whereas on the flat serve, it's not quite yet. Now, the difference is extremely subtle, and it has to be subtle because you want to disguise your serve. But take that racket when you want to slice, throw it back a little bit more. You'll notice by the time we get here, it's almost identical. It's just that a different stretch has been loaded into the shoulder and loaded into the forearm. So throw the racket back to your left a little bit more, and it'll cut across to your right a little bit more. Last thing I want to mention is that the serve is powered by a shoulder whip. You throw the racket up into the air as hard as you can, and then you get your humerus to stop, and then that whole system whips around in a motion called internal shoulder rotation. We've got a full video about that and developing that. Obviously, the harder you can whip your shoulder, the harder you can hit flat and the harder you can slice.